National Treasury has declined Eskom's request for partial exemption in the reporting of irregular and wasteful expenditure. Eskom was seeking a 3-year exemption from including this in its annual financial statement. Treasury says it arrived at its decision after considering the public outcry over the issue. The organization Undoing Tax Abuse has welcomed this move. Its CEO is Wayne Duvenage, who joins us now via our video link for more on this. Wayne, it's lovely to see you. Thanks as always for making time for Newzroom Afrika. Goes without saying, at the time of this decision being made public after that gazette was issued, OUTA was among the organizations that strongly pushed back. At the time, though, we were told that part of the reason why Eskom actually needed to have this exemption was to try and woo investors. I wonder what you make of that explanation now that the finance minister has done somewhat of a U-turn.
Yeah, exactly. I think in our letter to the minister, when he called for input on that decision, was that the investors are not fooled by that type of reporting. They will be able to gain that information, and it needs to be put in the financial statements. If it's not, and they know that it's not, then they're going to be even more wary of providing financial support and loans to Eskom. So that excuse was a very weak one, and it didn't fly well with the investors anyway. So yeah, it didn't make sense at all.
Right. I sometimes do wonder, because we've had several experts also weighing in, telling us that what Eskom was actually asking for is nothing new, and in fact it's accepted practice in the private sector. This idea that sometimes there are things that you need to do, you don't happen to have the money, technically you put that down as wasteful and irregular expenditure, but it's something you reconcile somewhere down the line. Do you reckon people have been too harsh on Eskom?
No, not at all. Eskom, it's not like the private sector. The private sector has investors that watch the financial hygiene and management of finances in companies, and they pull their investments out if need be, if they're not happy with what they see. Eskom is a very different kettle of fish. We are the investors, the public, in Eskom. We have no choice. There's no competition here. We can't rush off to Eskom 2 or Eskom 3 to buy our electricity from. And so you have the Public Finance Management Act that governs Eskom. It needs to be more onerous because, as I said, this is state funds, and they need to be extremely transparent with wasteful expenditure and irregular expenditure. And if they are going to try and hide that information or not report on it, it sends the wrong message, not only to investors, but to the public. We start losing trust in government and their ability to manage our finances. So it has to be more onerous, and they have to account for all of these expenses, and they need to be extremely transparent with it. So you can't compare Eskom to the private sector. The private sector funders will rush off and not invest in private companies that mismanage their finances.
Yeah. I suppose what makes it really difficult to argue Eskom's case is the fact that, look, the track record isn't great. There's already such an incredible trust deficit, even among people who have the capacity to help. And that, I suppose, has given credence to the skepticism that OUTA, I imagine, also shares.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so imperative that we have the transparency, and for Eskom to be asking for these exemptions because it is onerous and it is there's a lot of work that has to go into unpacking what is fruitless and wasteful expenditure and irregular. But quite frankly, our view is then if that's the work that has to be done for you to get on top of your finances, then you need to do that. You need to have the systems. When we looked at their reasons provided for wanting these exemptions, they were very, very weak. And it spoke to, an inability to manage its costs, to have good oversight, to have good systems, and to be able to measure accurately. That's what we're asking for as the public. Do the financial hygiene, put all the processes in place, make sure that you can account for the money. We're not talking right down to the last cent, but make sure that you can account for the funds that you are spending. And if it's wasteful and if it's fruitless, that's the information that management needs to take and start honing in on where the waste is happening, where the fruitless expenditure is happening. And that's how you manage good institutions. To try and hide that information, to try and not report on it, sends the wrong message, and it goes the wrong way, and it makes Eskom more vulnerable to corruption and maladministration.
Yeah. I wonder what you make of the work that's been done at Eskom so far. And I'm asking this on the back of an interview I actually heard where I think it was Chris Yelland who mentioned how, for instance, the kind of reprieve we're experiencing in load shedding is somewhat of a good sign. Look, he didn't say that we're out the woods just yet, but part of his sentiment is that the electricity minister appears to have a good sense of what he's doing. And, if this carries on, we may very well see the end of load shedding, perhaps in the next 2 years. Are you as upbeat?
Yeah, I think so. I'll tell you why. We're in the deepest part of winter right now. And prior to this, a few months ago, we were at level 6, stage 6 for most of the time. And nothing else has come on stream. No new energy sources have come on stream. For instance, Kusile 3 units that are down in Badupis and Kuberg that is having its life extension. None of those have come on stream to ease the capacity. So what essentially is happening is that Eskom is getting on top of the sabotage or the outages that are happening in the main coal-fired power stations that are providing electricity to the grid. And if they've been able to do that, well, that sends a very, very clear signal that if you get on top of that and you fix those other units, before you start bringing on the other renewable streams that should be coming on in the next year or 2 years, then we are going to be out of the woods from a load shedding point of view. So it really does show how getting on top of the outages, the unplanned outages that are happening at these coal-fired power stations is part of the solution. And I think dealing with the sabotage and the maladministration inside those plants is part of the reason why we have this reprieve or this downscaling of load shedding. And that's a good sign.
Yeah, absolutely. The question, I suppose, then becomes, does Hossein Ramokgopa have the support he needs? We've heard so many stories of, for lack of a better term, people who want to do the right thing, having some of those efforts being stifled by those who have an interest in ensuring that Eskom doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly. And that is the big fight. And maybe he's getting on top of that. Maybe the Eskom management are getting on top of it. We still don't believe it was necessary to put in a third person on top in trying to deal with the energy crisis, be that as it may. I think what this is also showing is that government's knee-jerk reaction to try and bring in car power ships, which would only come on stream in a year's time, even if it did, it just goes to show right now that we don't need those types of energy solutions plugging into the system. If we can fix what we currently have, bring on stream the new independent power producers that should be coming on stream and get Kusile and Medupi firing on all 4 cylinders, I think we'll be out of the woods.
Wayne Duvenage, great speaking to you. Thanks very much indeed for your time. Wayne is the CEO of the organization Undoing Tax Abuse. Thanks very much indeed.